Keanu Reeves thought his mansion was empty until he opened a door at midnight and found his cleaner secretly sketching impossible equations by a dim light. A single notebook would unravel her hidden genius, her darkest fears, and a choice that could change the world forever. What Keanu did next shocked everyone. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The night was quiet as Keanu Reeves stepped out of the car and into the driveway of his Los Angeles home. He had just returned from a charity gala downtown, where cameras flashed and reporters asked endless questions about donations, causes, and upcoming film projects. On the surface, it had been another successful evening. Yet beneath the tuxedo and polite smile, he carried the heavy fatigue that came from giving so much of himself to the world. It was past midnight, and he longed for silence, the kind of silence only his home could give him. He pushed open the front door and let the stillness wash over him. The house was dim, most of the lights turned off hours ago. He placed his keys on the table and loosened his tie. Normally at this hour, the staff had long gone. The housekeeper came in during the day, and the evening cleaner, Elena Ramirez, usually finished her work by 10. She was discreet, almost invisible, the kind of worker who kept her head down and her hands busy. He rarely saw her except in passing, a polite nod exchanged as she wiped down counters or emptied bins. She was reliable, quiet, and carried herself with the dignity of someone who had endured far more than her position revealed. Keanu headed toward his study to put away a few papers he had carried back from the event. That was when he noticed something unusual. A faint glow of light slipped from under the door of the study, pooling faintly against the hallway's polished wooden floor. He paused, puzzled. He was certain he had turned off that lamp before leaving. The rest of the house was dark, yet here was a quiet betrayal of shadows and light. At first, he thought perhaps he had left the lamp on by mistake, but then, faintly, he heard the rustle of paper and the scratch of a pen. Someone was inside. His body tightened with instinct. He moved carefully toward the door, each step silent, his senses sharpening. For a moment, his mind conjured possibilities. A break-in, an intruder, perhaps even someone desperate enough to hide inside. But as he reached the door, the sounds became clearer. It was not the hurried movement of a thief. It was slow, deliberate, someone writing, stopping, muttering softly under their breath. The rhythm was steady, focused, almost academic. Keanu pressed his hand against the door frame and eased the door open just enough to peer inside. What he saw stopped him cold. Sitting at his desk, hunched over a battered notebook, was Elena Ramirez, the cleaner he had barely exchanged more than a few polite words with. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, strands falling across her face. Her work uniform looked worn from long hours, and beside her on the desk sat a small second-hand calculator with fading buttons. The overhead lamp cast a pale light across her face, illuminating the deep concentration in her eyes. But it wasn't the sight of Elena herself that made Keanu's breath catch. It was what she was doing. Her notebook, its cover scuffed and fraying, was filled with dense calculations and diagrams that sprawled across the pages in neat precision. She wasn't doodling or scribbling random notes. These were equations, advanced equations, that looked eerily familiar. Geometric sketches, energy flow diagrams, complex patterns that mirrored designs Keanu had once glimpsed in the research labs of engineers he had funded. Keanu stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing. Why would a cleaner, a woman he had assumed led a modest, ordinary life, be working on problems that seemed closer to graduate-level engineering or beyond? She didn't notice him. Her focus was absolute, her lips moving faintly, as if whispering formulas to herself. Her pen flew across the paper with urgency, as though afraid the ideas would vanish if not captured fast enough. He stayed silent, not wanting to startle her, but every fiber of his being was pulled into the moment. The scene before him was almost surreal. By day, she scrubbed floors and emptied wastebaskets. By night, she sat in his study, solving puzzles that men with advanced degrees and high salaries struggled to unravel. Keanu's heart ached at the sight. Here was brilliance hidden in plain sight, disguised in the uniform of a cleaner. The contrast was almost unbearable. He thought of all the faces he had seen over the years, actors, producers, wealthy donors, all with their privileges on display. Yet here, under the glow of a cheap lamp, sat a woman whose genius had been buried by circumstance. He leaned against the door frame, torn between announcing his presence and remaining a silent witness. His instinct told him this was fragile. If he interrupted, she might shut down, ashamed or defensive. But if he stayed, he could learn more. He watched her pause, press the worn calculator with careful fingers, and then jot down another line of equations with certainty. She didn't fumble, she didn't guess, she knew. And in that quiet midnight moment, Keanu Reeves realized that this discovery could change everything, not only for Elena Ramirez, but perhaps for himself too. Keanu's chest rose and fell slowly as he lingered in the doorway, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The quiet tick of the clock on the far wall only deepened the surreal atmosphere. Elena's pen scratched furiously across the paper, her concentration unbroken. Every so often she would stop, furrow her brow, and whisper something in Spanish, as if arguing with herself. Then she would try again, adjusting a line or recalculating a figure with the old calculator that looked like it might break at any moment. The sight stirred something inside him, a memory of his own restless nights, when grief and loneliness had pushed him to read philosophy, poetry, and history until dawn. He knew what it was to seek refuge in books and ideas, even if the world outside dismissed your pain. But what Elena was doing went far beyond seeking comfort. This wasn't escape. This was creation. He moved another step into the room, silent as the shadows. His eyes fell on one page where she had drawn the cross-section of a cylindrical object. Notes in the margins described energy transfer, resistance, and output efficiency. The words weren't random, they were technical, precise. He recognized enough to know that her work echoed clean energy designs his friends in Silicon Valley were only beginning to test. How could she possibly know this? Keanu's first instinct was skepticism. Maybe she was copying diagrams from a textbook. But when he leaned slightly closer, he saw the truth. The notebook wasn't a copy of anything. It was full of raw thought, trial and error, lines scratched out, arrows pointing to corrections. She was working through problems on her own, not repeating answers she had read elsewhere. For a moment, he considered interrupting her, simply asking what she was doing, but he stopped himself. He sensed that if she looked up and saw him, the fragile spell of the moment would break. And he didn't want it to end. He wanted to see how far she would go, what else her mind would reveal when she thought no one was watching. His eyes drifted to her face. There was something both beautiful and heartbreaking in the way she leaned over the notebook, eyes tired but burning with determination. The uniform she wore looked faded from years of use, and her hands bore the marks of someone who cleaned for a living, small cuts, the pastor, roughness of constant scrubbing. Yet, those same hands moved across the paper with the certainty of a master craftsman. Keanu thought about the imbalance of it all. Here was a woman who scrubbed his floors during the day and returned at night to solve problems that could reshape the future, and no one knew. Not her supervisors, not her coworkers, probably not even her own family. A knot tightened in his chest. How many Elenas existed in the world? How many brilliant minds were ignored because they didn't fit the mold, because they worked as cleaners or cooks or drivers, because they carried accents or wore uniforms that made them invisible? He felt anger simmer at the injustice, but also awe at the resilience. Elena hadn't let her circumstances stop her from dreaming. She dreamed anyway, with pen and paper, even if no one would ever see. The thought shook him. It made him feel small, in the best possible way. Reminded him that greatness doesn't always walk red carpets or sit in boardrooms. Sometimes it waits in the dark, hunched over a battered notebook, scribbling equations by the light of a single lamp. Keanu stayed rooted to the spot, silently watching, silently wondering. How long had this been going on under his own roof without him noticing? And more importantly, what would he do now that he had seen it? Keanu shifted his weight, careful not to make the floor creak. He could feel the intensity of the moment pressing down on him. Elena was lost in her world, and he was an uninvited witness. Her pen slowed as she turned a page and began a fresh diagram, this time sketching what looked like a lattice of interconnected cells. She labeled each section with notations that suggested energy storage, release rates, and potential yields. It looked like a blueprint for a battery system. He blinked, leaning slightly closer. A battery system not unlike the ones energy companies were desperately trying to perfect, but hers carried a simplicity that made it seem elegant, almost too efficient. He felt goosebumps rise along his arms. He wasn't an engineer, but he had seen enough presentations and prototypes to know when something carried promise. This wasn't random guesswork, this was vision. Elena paused, her fingers resting lightly on the page. She whispered something, almost like a prayer, then shook her head and jotted down another calculation. For the first time, Keanu noticed the tremble in her hands, not from uncertainty, but from exhaustion. Her uniform sleeves were rolled up, and her wrists looked thin, worn from years of work. He realized she must have been on her feet all day, cleaning rooms just like this one, and yet here she was, still awake, still fighting for ideas that no one might ever read. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. There was something profoundly unfair about it. He thought of the men and women he had met at the gala earlier, sipping champagne while trading shallow remarks about philanthropy. He compared them to Elena, alone in the quiet of his study, sacrificing sleep to pursue knowledge she had no outlet for. One group lived in the spotlight, recognized for gestures of kindness. The other lived in shadows, unseen even while performing acts of brilliance. The clock ticked past 1 in the morning. Keanu knew he couldn't stand in the doorway forever. He would have to make a choice, step into the room and reveal himself, or slip away and leave her secret intact. 100 questions ran through his mind. If he spoke, would she panic? Would she shut the notebook, ashamed of being caught? Would she ever trust him again? And yet, if he said nothing, how could he return to pretending he didn't know? He had stumbled upon something extraordinary, and to ignore it felt impossible. His heart pounded. He thought of his own life, of the people who had once looked past him when he was a struggling actor, of the few who had believed in him when no one else would. Maybe Elena needed someone to believe in. Her too. He took one step forward, the floor groaning faintly under his weight. Elena stiffened, her pen freezing mid-stroke. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes wide as they locked with his. For an instant, fear flashed across her face, the kind of fear that came from years of expecting punishment whenever she stepped out of line. She looked ready to slam the notebook shut, to bury her secret forever. Keanu didn't speak. He simply raised his hand in a small, reassuring gesture, his expression soft. He wanted her to see, not judgment, not intrusion, but respect. Respect for the courage it took to dream in the dark. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Then Elena lowered her eyes, her lips pressed tight, as if waiting for him to dismiss her. But Keanu Reeves didn't move, didn't condemn, didn't walk away. He stood there, humbled, awed, and quietly shaken. In that fragile midnight moment, one truth became clear. This discovery wasn't an accident. It was a turning point. Whatever path lay ahead, nothing between them or in the world would ever be the same again. The moment Elena's eyes met Keanu's, her body went rigid. The pen slipped from her hand and rolled across the desk, landing on the floor with a small clatter. She straightened up instantly, her notebook half shut beneath her trembling hands. "Mr. Reeves, Her voice cracked, panic surging into her expression. She stood quickly, almost knocking over the lamp, her breaths shallow and uneven. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be in here. Please, forgive me. I'll leave right away." She gathered her things in a frantic sweep, trying to close the battered notebook. But Keanu stepped forward with calm steadiness. "Elena," he said softly, his tone low, almost soothing. "It's all right. You don't have to run." Her eyes filled with fear. "I was only cleaning, and then I I just sat for a moment. Please don't fire me. I can't lose this job. My daughter. She stopped herself, her lips pressed tight, as though she had already said too much. Keanu raised his hand gently. You're not in trouble. I promise you that. I just want to ask one thing. He pointed, not at her uniform or the lamp, but at the notebook she clutched to her chest. What are you working on? For a long moment, she didn't answer. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes darting to the door as if escape was still an option. But there was something in his voice, a sincerity, that didn't sound like judgment or mockery. Slowly, she lowered her gaze, her knuckles white around the edges of the notebook. It's nothing, she whispered. Just drawings, scribbles, dreams that don't mean anything. Keanu tilted his head, his expression steady. Dreams don't look like that. I saw your pages. They're equations, designs, things most people couldn't even begin to imagine. Elena's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her posture. Her voice cracked again, but softer this time. They're just thoughts. I don't even know if they're right. I write them down before I forget. That's all. He stepped closer, keeping his movements slow and respectful, as though not to spook her further. Do you do this often? Her eyes flickered up to his, then down again. She nodded once. At night, after work. When everything is quiet, I keep notebooks. Many of them. They're not real science. I never study beyond high school. I just dream things, and then I draw them. The vulnerability in her tone pressed on his chest. She wasn't boasting. She wasn't asking for recognition. She was confessing, terrified that this secret could cost her everything. Can I see? He asked gently, gesturing toward the notebook. Her arms tightened around it. If you laugh, if you think I'm crazy, I won't survive it. Keanu shook his head slowly. I would never laugh. I've seen too much in life to laugh at someone's dream. Show me, only if you're ready. Her hands trembled, torn between fear and trust. Then, slowly, she opened the cover and laid the notebook on the desk. Pages filled with intricate lines, formulas, and diagrams stared back at him. Keanu leaned closer, his breath steady, his eyes tracing the extraordinary work of a woman the world had overlooked. Keanu turned the pages carefully, as though each one were something fragile and sacred. Every sheet was covered in dense sketches, layered with notations in both English and Spanish. The lines were steady, the ideas flowing with precision, not the scattered marks of someone doodling to pass time. These aren't scribbles, he murmured, almost to himself. This is advanced work. Elena's cheeks burned with shame, though she didn't look away. I don't know if it's right. Sometimes I wake in the night with a picture in my head, numbers flashing like a language I don't understand. I write them down before they vanish. Later, I try to make sense of them with what little I know. He glanced at her, surprised. So, these ideas, they come in dreams? She nodded slowly. Dreams, thoughts, flashes. I can't explain it. It feels like borrowing something from a place my mind isn't supposed to reach. She hesitated, her voice dropping. But it doesn't matter. They're just dreams. No one would ever care what a cleaning lady writes in the dark. The sadness in her tone cut him deeply. That's not true, he said firmly. I care, and I think anyone who saw this would care. Her lips trembled. If only caring could pay the bills. The words hung heavy in the air. Keanu set the notebook down gently, then looked at her with quiet compassion. Tell me, Elena, why do you keep doing this if you believe no one will ever see it? Her eyes softened, with both defiance and pain. Because I have to. If I don't write, I can't breathe. These ideas, they haunt me until I put them on paper. It's the only thing that's mine. The only thing that reminds me I'm more than just a mop and a bucket. Keanu nodded slowly, understanding more than she realized. You are so much more. Her throat tightened. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, then finally spoke the truth she had kept hidden for years. I wasn't always here. I came from Mexico 12 years ago. My husband Daniel was supposed to meet us once we got settled. He was killed in a construction accident before he ever had the chance. I was 28, alone, and I had a little girl to raise. Keanu's chest tightened. Your daughter? Elena's eyes glistened with tears she tried to hide. Isabella. She's 12 now. Beautiful. Smart. Too smart sometimes. Her voice broke. But she was born with a chronic illness. Her heart is weak. She's in and out of hospitals, taking medicine I can barely afford. Every shift I take, every night I clean, every aching bone I carry, it's all for her. The confession hit Keanu with force. Suddenly, the picture sharpened. The late nights, the trembling hands, the desperate energy poured into notebooks by the glow of a cheap lamp. She wasn't chasing glory. She was fighting to keep her child alive. Keanu leaned forward, his voice gentle but steady. Elena, you're carrying the weight of 2 worlds. And still, you dream. Her tears slipped free. She turned away, ashamed of her own weakness. Dreams don't heal, Isabella. They don't pay doctors. They don't matter. But Keanu shook his head. They matter more than you know. And I think you've been carrying something far greater than just dreams. Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, embarrassed by her own tears. You're kind to listen, Mr. Reeves. But please, don't tell anyone. If my supervisor found out I was wasting time in your study, I'd be gone by morning. I can't take that risk. Keanu's gaze softened. You have my word, Elena. Nothing you've shared leaves this room. She studied his face carefully, as if searching for any sign of pity or deception. All she found was sincerity. Slowly, she sat back down, her notebook still open between them. Her fingers traced one of the diagrams absent-mindedly, as though touching the ink might make it real. Sometimes I wonder if I'm foolish, she admitted quietly. I spend hours drawing things I don't even understand. I've never been to college. I don't have the language to explain half of it. But still, the numbers keep coming. Sometimes I wake Isabella at night by accident, mumbling formulas in my sleep. Keanu leaned on the edge of the desk, his voice steady. That isn't foolish. That's brilliance trying to break through. Her laugh was short and bitter. Brilliance? If I were brilliant, would I be scrubbing toilets at midnight? He met her eyes without hesitation. Sometimes the world buries its brightest lights in the darkest places, but it doesn't make the light any less real. The words seemed to pierce something inside her. She blinked quickly, struggling to hold back another wave of tears. Why are you saying this? Why do you even care? Keanu hesitated, then spoke with honesty that surprised even him. Because I know what it feels like to be unseen. To have more inside you than anyone realizes. And because I can't stand here and pretend this is just a notebook. It's more than that. It's a part of you, and it matters. Her breath caught. For the first time, she let the silence rest between them without rushing to fill it. The faint hum of the lamp was the only sound. Finally, she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what any of this means. I only know that when I write, I feel like I'm not trapped anymore. For a little while, I'm free. Keanu straightened, a quiet resolve forming in his chest. Then keep writing. Keep drawing. Don't let anyone take that freedom from you. Not fear, not exhaustion, not the world outside. Promise me that. She looked up at him, startled by the intensity of his words. Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. Then, slowly, she whispered, I promise. Keanu exhaled, a subtle relief passing through him. He wasn't sure what he would do next, but one thing was clear. Elena Ramirez was not ordinary, and her battered notebook was not just paper and ink. It was a doorway into her hidden genius, into her unspoken strength, and into a future neither of them could yet imagine. 2 days later, Keanu found himself standing outside a modest apartment complex on the edge of Los Angeles. The building was worn down, its paint chipped, and its narrow stairwell carrying the scent of cleaning solution and old carpet. He adjusted the small paper bag of groceries he had brought and knocked on the door with quiet hesitation. Inside, there was movement. A moment later, Elena's voice called from within, cautious but familiar. "Who is it?" "It's me," Keanu answered softly. "Keanu." The door opened slowly, and Elena appeared, her face weary but surprised. "Mr. Reeves, you didn't have to come here." "I wanted to," he replied gently. "I thought I could bring a few things." He lifted the bag slightly, and for the first time that evening, she allowed herself a small, tired smile. She stepped aside to let him in. The apartment was small, its walls lined with shelves of secondhand books and hand-me-down furniture. A narrow kitchen opened into a living room, where an oxygen machine hummed quietly near a couch covered in blankets. Sitting there was Isabella. She was 12, her thin frame bundled in pajamas with faded cartoon prints. Her dark eyes were wide with curiosity as she looked at Keanu, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. Despite the fragility in her body, her smile was bright. "Mama, is that?" she began. "Yes," Elena interrupted softly. "This is Mr. Reeves. He's been kind to me at work." Keanu stepped closer and offered a warm smile. "Hi, Isabella. It's nice to finally meet you." The girl tilted her head, studying him. "You're the man Mama talks about sometimes. The one who says please and thank you to everyone, even when you don't have to." Her words caught him off guard. He laughed gently. "I suppose that's me." Elena busied herself setting the groceries down in the kitchen, giving them a moment to speak. Keanu knelt by the couch so he could be at Isabella's eye level. "How are you feeling today?" he asked kindly. She shrugged, her small shoulders rising beneath the blanket. "Some days are good, some days are not. But Mama always makes it better." Her eyes flickered toward the table in the corner, where a pile of notebooks sat stacked neatly. "Even when she's tired, she writes in those. She says dreams don't wait." Keanu glanced at the notebooks, recognizing the battered covers. "She told me a little about them." Isabella leaned in, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "She doesn't tell everyone, but she dreams of machines and inventions. Sometimes she wakes up at night and starts writing right away, like the dream will disappear if she doesn't. I think it's more than just dreams." Keanu's heart quickened. "What do you mean?" The girl looked down at her hands, her voice soft but certain. "I think Mama's dreams are gifts. Not everyone dreams like that. Not everyone sees things that don't exist yet. But she does. I think God whispers answers to her in her sleep." Her innocence carried a weight that struck Keanu deeply. He thought back to his own childhood, to the nights he had felt alone, searching for meaning in the silence. He saw the same resilience in Isabella's eyes, but hers shone with hope for her mother. For the first time that evening, Keanu felt his purpose sharpen. This wasn't just about sketches in a notebook. This was about a daughter who believed her mother carried something sacred. Elena returned from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, setting one carefully in front of Keanu. Her hands lingered on the rim of her own cup, as though she needed its warmth to steady herself. She glanced at Isabella, who was still watching Keanu with quiet fascination. "Isabella, don't bother him," Elena said gently. "He didn't come here for stories." But Keanu shook his head. "I came here for both of you. Please, let her speak." The girl brightened at his words and leaned forward. "Mama thinks her notebooks are just scribbles, but I know better. Sometimes she shows me her dreams before she hides them away. She'll say things like, 'This is just a silly idea,' but then later I hear doctors or teachers talking about something almost the same. It's like she dreams the future." Elena flushed, embarrassed. "Don't exaggerate, mija." "I'm not," Isabella insisted. "Remember the hospital machine that broke last year? You dreamed about a way to fix it, and when the technician came, he used the same idea. You told him, and he looked at you funny, like he couldn't believe you knew." Keanu's eyes widened, and he turned back to Elena. "Is that true?" She looked down, ashamed. "It was just a coincidence. I've worked around enough machines to guess sometimes." But Isabella shook her head stubbornly. "No, Mama. You knew. You always know. and you keep it a secret because you're afraid people won't believe you." The room fell silent. Keanu felt the weight of the child's words. This wasn't a daughter flattering her mother. This was conviction born of living beside someone extraordinary. He spoke carefully. "Elena, your daughter sees you more clearly than anyone else. Maybe you should believe her." Elena let out a trembling sigh. "Believing won't change our reality. Rent is still due. Medicine is still expensive. My notebooks won't keep the lights on." Isabella reached out, slipping her small hand into Keanu's. "That's why you're here, isn't it?" she asked softly. Her innocence disarmed him. He swallowed, choosing his words with care. "I don't know exactly why I'm here yet, but I know your mother has something rare, something important, and I know you believe in her. That matters more than you realize." The girl smiled faintly, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "Maybe you're an angel in disguise. Mama prays for help every night." "Listen." Elena's eyes snapped to her daughter, startled. "Isabella, don't say that." But Keanu felt a chill run through him, not from discomfort, but from the profound truth in her words. He thought of all the twists of fate that had led him to that midnight doorway. Perhaps this was no accident at all. The apartment grew quiet after Isabella's words, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Keanu stayed kneeling by the couch, the little girl's hand still resting in his. Her eyes, so fragile, yet so full of conviction, reminded him of his own childhood nights when loneliness felt heavier than the world, when he longed for someone to notice that he was more than what circumstances tried to make him. "Elena," he said softly, glancing toward her, "do you hear what your daughter is saying? She sees you. She believes in you with everything she has." Elena pressed her lips together, her shoulders trembling as if a storm were locked inside her. "She believes because she doesn't know the weight yet. She doesn't know how many doors slam shut on people like us." Her voice cracked. "I can't let her hope for miracles that never come." Keanu stood slowly and crossed the room, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. Maybe the miracle isn't some grand thing falling from the sky. Maybe it's the gift already inside you. And maybe it's Isabella's faith that refuses to let it be buried. Elena looked at him, caught between disbelief and yearning. Her hands gripped the counter behind her, as though she needed something solid to hold her to the ground. Isabella's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. "Mama, don't you see? I don't need miracles. I just need you. Your dreams are already miracles to me." Tears spilled down Elena's face before she could stop them. She crossed the room in 2 quick steps and embraced her daughter tightly. Isabella buried her face in her mother's chest, her thin arms wrapping around her neck with surprising strength. Keanu watched the scene, his own eyes stinging. It was as if he were witnessing a secret language between mother and child, one built on love, sacrifice, and unshakable belief. He realized in that moment that helping Elena wasn't about giving her a chance. It was about honoring a bond that had already carried her through impossible trials. When Elena finally looked up, her face was wet, but steadier. "Mr. Reeves," she said quietly, "I don't know what you see in me, but thank you for seeing it." Keanu gave a small smile. "It's not just me. Isabella sees it too, maybe more clearly than anyone." The girl giggled softly, squeezing her mother's hand. "I told you, Mama, he's an angel in disguise." Keanu chuckled, though his heart swelled with emotion. He wasn't sure he deserved such a title, but he knew this. He couldn't walk away now. Not when a child's hope and a mother's hidden genius hung so delicately in the balance. He nodded once, firmly. "This isn't the end, Elena. This is the beginning. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out, together." For the first time since he had entered that apartment, the weight in the room seemed to lift. Elena's eyes, still damp with tears, glimmered with the faintest spark of belief, and Isabella, curled against her mother, smiled as though she had just seen the first light of dawn. The next week at the Beverly Hills mansion brought a quiet tension Elena couldn't shake. She moved carefully through the polished hallways, cleaning as she always had, but the rhythm felt disrupted. Whispers followed her more often now. A pair of co-workers glanced at her when she entered the staff room, lowering their voices mid-sentence. She caught fragments her name, Keanu's name, and words like trouble and favoritism. It didn't take long for the source of unease to reveal itself. Mrs. Henderson, the head supervisor for the cleaning staff, called Elena into her office. The small room was lined with filing cabinets and smelled faintly of lemon polish. Mrs. Henderson sat behind her desk, her thin glasses perched low on her nose. "Elena," she began in her clipped tone, "I've noticed you've been stepping away from your duties more frequently." Elena shifted nervously. "Only when necessary, ma'am. My daughter's health sometimes requires." Mrs. Henderson cut her off. "I'm not speaking about your daughter. I'm speaking about your conversations." She tapped a folder with her manicured finger. "Several employees have reported seeing you in the study after hours with Mr. Reeves." Elena's chest tightened. "I was only cleaning?" Mrs. Henderson arched an eyebrow. "That's what I should hope. But you see, it looks rather inappropriate when a cleaning staff member spends extended time in the employer's private study. People are beginning to wonder if you're distracted." Elena's hands trembled. "It's nothing like that. I would never." "Then keep it that way," Mrs. Henderson said coldly. "One misstep, Elena, and this job is gone. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena whispered, her throat dry. When she left the office, her co-workers avoided her gaze. She knew what they were thinking. No one wanted trouble with the supervisor, and she was fast becoming trouble. That evening, as she slipped out after her shift, Keanu was waiting by the side gate. He had chosen a quiet corner where the security cameras didn't quite reach. His face was calm, but his eyes carried concern. "You're late," he said softly. Elena hugged her arms around herself. "Mrs. Henderson spoke to me. People are talking. They think I'm spending too much time near you. If she fires me, I'll lose everything." Keanu's jaw tightened. "You won't lose everything. I won't let that happen." She shook her head, panic in her voice. "You don't understand. One paycheck gone, and Isabella's medicine stops. We can't risk it. We can't risk you being seen with me." Keanu lowered his voice, steady and reassuring. "Then we'll be careful. We'll meet outside of work, after hours, somewhere safe. I still need to see your notebooks, Elena. What you've shown me already, it's more than coincidence." Her heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He looked at her directly. "Some of your designs, they match research. I funded years ago research that hasn't been released yet. It's like you've been seeing answers my teams have been struggling to find." Elena stared at him, shaken to her core. "That's impossible." Keanu shook his head slowly. "I used to think so too." Elena sat across from Keanu at a small diner on the outskirts of town, her battered notebook open between them. It was past midnight, and the place was nearly empty except for a tired waiter wiping down counters. Keanu leaned forward, scanning the diagram she had drawn in shaky pen strokes. "This one," he said, pointing to a page filled with careful sketches of circuits and arrows. "Do you know what you've written here?" Elena frowned, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Not really. It came to me in a dream. Like most of them. I just drew what I saw. I thought it was nonsense." Keanu shook his head, his voice hushed but urgent. "It's not nonsense. It's a model for a next-generation battery cooling system. My team at one of the labs has been working on something nearly identical for years, but your version, it's simpler, more efficient. You solved a problem they haven't." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "But I don't even understand the science behind it. I only imagine it." Keanu closed the notebook carefully, his hand resting on its cover. "That's exactly why it scares me, Elena. If anyone outside of this booth sees what you've written, they won't just call you talented. They'll want to own it. They'll want to own you." Her chest tightened. "Own me?" He nodded grimly. "Corporations, governments, they spend billions chasing solutions like these. If word spreads that a cleaning woman holds answers they can't find, they won't treat you as a person. They'll treat you as property." Elena looked down at her hands, knuckles white from gripping the edge of the table. "And Isabella? They'd come for her too?" Keanu hesitated, then spoke the truth. Yes, they wouldn't hesitate. Her breath shook as she exhaled. Then, I should stop. Stop writing. Stop dreaming. Destroy the notebooks before they ruin us. Keanu leaned forward sharply, his voice low but firm. No, don't ever destroy them. Your mind is a gift, Elena. What you're doing isn't an accident. But we need to protect it. Protect you and Isabella. That's why we meet in secret now. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded faintly. I never asked for this. I just wanted to survive. To keep my daughter alive. Keanu softened, his tone shifting to reassurance. And you will. But Elena, survival isn't enough for someone like you. You were meant to change lives, not just endure them. That's why I can't walk away. The waiter passed by with a refill of coffee, breaking the heavy silence. Elena whispered once the man was gone. Mrs. Henderson already suspects. If she pushes harder, I'll lose my job. If she digs deeper, she might even find the notebooks. Keanu looked her in the eyes, unwavering. Then we'll make sure she doesn't. The following days grew heavier with unease. At the mansion, Elena kept her head down, but whispers trailed after her like shadows. A custodian she'd known for years leaned in one afternoon and whispered, They say Mrs. Henderson's watching you. Careful, Elena. Don't give her reason. Every swipe of her mop, every trash bag she tied, felt as though invisible eyes were recording her. She avoided the study altogether, terrified that even glancing at the room might confirm suspicions. Yet at night, when Isabella's breathing grew soft and steady in their cramped apartment, Elena couldn't stop herself from opening her notebooks. She wrote feverishly, as if the designs would vanish if she waited. Meanwhile, Keanu arranged their secret meetings in places no one from the mansion would look: quiet diners, a bench by a closed park, even the back corner of a library. He listened as she explained her latest sketches, his heart tightening each time he recognized concepts from unreleased research. One evening, as the three of them sat together in the library, Isabella curled up with a children's book while Elena shared her newest drawings. Keanu traced a diagram of solar cells with his fingertip, his expression grave. This is uncanny, he murmured. 5 years ago, I funded a private think tank to explore renewable grids. They only just reached a model that looks like this. And here you are, sketching it in your notebook with nothing but a second-hand calculator. Elena's hand shook as she pulled the paper back. I don't understand why this happens to me. I never studied beyond high school. I've never even stepped inside a university. Why do these things come to me? Keanu paused, then answered quietly. Maybe because the world needed someone who would see answers others overlook. Maybe your circumstances don't limit you, they sharpen you. Isabella looked up from her book, her voice small but certain. Mama, maybe your dreams are bigger than you. Maybe they're meant for everyone. Elena reached for her daughter's hand, overwhelmed by the child's faith. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a coworker. Mrs. Henderson asked about you again today. Be careful. The color drained from her face. Keanu read the panic in her eyes and spoke quickly. Listen to me. We can't let fear silence you. But we also can't let your work be exposed before you're ready. If Mrs. Henderson presses harder, we'll find a way to protect you. Both of you. Elena's voice broke. And if I'm fired? Keanu looked from mother to daughter, his resolve hardening. Then I'll make sure you never face that alone. They can take away a job. They can't take away your brilliance. For the first time that night, Elena allowed herself to believe it. Yet deep down, all three knew the danger was only beginning. The hospital waiting room was hushed except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional rattle of a rolling cart. Elena sat beside Isabella, holding her hand while the nurse reviewed charts. Isabella's checkup was routine, but every visit carried an edge of anxiety. Elena's gaze lingered on her daughter's pale cheeks, the fragile rise and fall of her chest. She whispered prayers silently, asking for strength to keep pushing forward. Keanu had joined them quietly, sitting on the opposite side of Isabella with a protective presence. He had grown used to these appointments, though he always felt a pang watching Elena's anxiety swell in these sterile halls. He leaned forward slightly and offered Isabella a small smile. "How are you feeling today, champ?" She smiled faintly. "Better. I don't get as tired walking up the stairs now." "That's good," Keanu said warmly. "Your strength is coming back." For a moment, there was peace, but then the sharp sound of heels on tile broke the quiet. Elena stiffened as she looked up to see Mrs. Henderson stride into the room, 2 building security guards flanking her like shadows. Her expression was tight, almost smug, as her gaze locked on Elena. "There you are, Mrs. Henderson said coldly. "I've been looking for you." Elena rose quickly, pulling Isabella closer to her side. "Mrs. Henderson, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to address misconduct, Mrs. Henderson replied crisply. She unfolded a paper from her handbag, waving it like a verdict. "Effective immediately, you are terminated. Fraternizing with management, dereliction of duty, and dishonesty in your role. Your employment is finished." Elena's mouth went dry. "What? Here? In front of my daughter?" Mrs. Henderson's lips curled. "Perhaps this will teach you the consequences of stepping above your station. You've been seen loitering in the study, whispering in corners, sneaking around with Mr. Reeves, as if you belong anywhere near him." Isabella clutched her mother's sleeve, eyes wide. "Mama?" Elena knelt beside her, her voice shaking. "It's all right, baby. Don't be scared." But Mrs. Henderson wasn't finished. She gestured toward the notebook peeking from Elena's bag. "And those ridiculous scribbles of yours, half-baked fantasies of someone who scrubs floors for a living. Did you really think anyone would take them seriously? They're delusions, Elena. Childish drawings, pretending to be science." Tears stung Elena's eyes as she pulled the notebook protectively against her chest. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words crumbled on her tongue. Her daughter was watching, her pride was on trial, and humiliation burned like fire in her veins. Then, Keanu stood. His voice cut through the room, steady but sharp. "That's enough." Mrs. Henderson blinked at him, startled by the sudden authority in his tone. "Mr. Reeves, surely you don't mean to defend this behavior." Keanu stepped closer to Elena and Isabella, his presence radiating quiet power. "I do, because what you call delusions are not scribbles. They are groundbreaking designs, and I intend to support them." The room froze. Nurses paused in the hallway. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim beneath Keanu's words. Elena's heart hammered in her chest, confusion flooding her mind. She turned sharply toward him, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. "Support them?" she whispered. "Keanu, what are you talking about?" Mrs. Henderson gave a brittle laugh. "Surely you're joking. Mr. Reeves, you're a respected actor, not an engineer. Don't tell me you've been taken in by her fantasies." Keanu didn't flinch. His voice carried calm conviction. "I've seen the notebooks myself. The sketches inside match advanced clean energy research I funded years ago. Research my teams are still struggling to complete." Elena didn't stumble on coincidences. She's solving problems no one else has solved. Gasps rippled through the waiting room. Isabella's eyes shone with pride, but Elena's face drained of color. She clutched the notebook tighter, trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, staring at Keanu. "All this time, you knew? You recognized my work, and you said nothing?" Keanu's jaw tightened. "I wanted to protect you, to make sure you were ready before anyone else knew. I was afraid of how dangerous it could be if the wrong people found out." Elena shook her head furiously, her tears spilling now. "Do you know what it feels like to bear your soul in these pages? To think they were foolish dreams, while you kept the truth from me? Do you know how small that makes me feel? Like you were studying me instead of believing in me." Her voice broke on the last words, raw with hurt. Isabella reached for her mother's hand, whispering, "Mama." Mrs. Henderson, sensing her authority slipping, stepped forward. "This is absurd. I will not allow this charade to continue in my building. Elena Ramirez is dismissed, and I will file a full report of this misconduct." Keanu turned toward her. his eyes cold for the first time. "You won't dismiss her. In fact, if anyone should be dismissed, it's you for humiliating and threatening an employee in front of her child, and for failing to recognize the extraordinary talent standing right in front of you." The guards shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. "Mrs." Henderson's confidence faltered, but she raised her chin stubbornly. "You can't protect her forever. She doesn't belong in your world." Elena's shoulders sagged under the weight of betrayal and fear. She wanted to disappear, to take Isabella and run before things grew worse. But Keanu placed a gentle hand on her arm, grounding her. His voice softened as he spoke only to her. "You do belong, Elena, more than you realize. And I'll prove it if you let me." Her breath caught. For the first time in years, she didn't know whether to cling to hope or retreat into safety. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. The humiliation of Mrs. Henderson's words and the shock of Keanu's revelation collided until she could barely stand. She pulled Isabella closer, shielding her with an arm. But her voice cracked when she spoke. "You should have told me, Keanu. From the beginning. Every night I thought I was alone in this madness. And all that time, you knew. You held back while I drowned in fear." He looked pained, his expression heavy with regret. "You're right. I should have told you sooner. I thought I was protecting you, but in truth, I was protecting myself. I didn't want to lose your trust if you thought I was only interested in your work. But Elena, believe me, I was always interested in you as a person, as a mother, as someone who carries more courage than anyone I've ever met." Her tears blurred his face, but his words sank deep. Still, anger and hurt clung to her chest. "Do you know how many times I almost threw these notebooks away? How many nights I called myself a fool while you stayed silent? You let me believe I was nothing more than a cleaner with crazy ideas." Keanu stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You are not nothing, Elena. You are the reason I believe in second chances, in hope. Your notebooks are more than sketches. They are blueprints for the future. And I promise you, I will stand beside you every step of the way if you let me." Isabella squeezed her mother's hand, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mama, he's telling the truth. I can feel it. Maybe this is what your dreams were always for someone to finally see them." Elena bowed her head, torn between pride and fear. She had spent years building walls to protect her daughter from disappointment, from loss, from the cruelty of a world that dismissed people like them. Letting someone in, even Keanu, felt like handing over the very heart she had fought to guard. Mrs. Henderson scoffed, though her voice had lost its sharp edge. "This is ridiculous. You expect me to believe a janitor holds answers that the brightest scientists cannot? It's a fantasy." Keanu turned to her, his voice rising with conviction. "It's not a fantasy. It's proof that brilliance doesn't care about job titles or social standing. It lives in unexpected places, in people who have been overlooked their entire lives. Elena is one of those people, and I won't let you belittle her again." The supervisor faltered under his gaze, then stormed out, with the guards trailing behind. The room exhaled with their departure, leaving Elena trembling in the aftermath. Keanu reached out, hesitant, and for a moment, she almost pulled away. But Isabella tugged her hand into his, bridging the gap. Elena's eyes glistened as she whispered, "If I trust you, Keanu, this can't be another secret. Not between us. Not anymore." He nodded, his grip gentle but resolute. "No more secrets, only truth." The hospital room felt suffocating after Mrs. Henderson stormed out. The silence left behind was heavier than her accusations. Elena stood frozen, clutching her notebook to her chest, her heart pounding with betrayal and confusion. Keanu still held her hand loosely, but she pulled away as though his touch burned. "You knew," she said, her voice raw. "All this time, you knew what these sketches meant, and you let me struggle. You watched me fall asleep on buses, watched me break my back cleaning, watched me ration medicine for my daughter, and you stayed silent." Keanu's face tightened with pain. "Elena, it wasn't like that. Don't," she snapped, tears flashing in her eyes. Don't tell me it wasn't like that. You sat there, night after night, listening to me pour my soul out, and all along you were holding the truth in your breast pocket like it was yours to decide when I was worthy of it. Isabella shifted nervously in her chair, her eyes darting between her mother and Keanu. She opened her mouth, but Elena's voice rose, drowning everything else out. You let me think I was a fool, that I was wasting time, chasing fantasies. You let me believe I was nothing more than a cleaner scribbling in the dark, while her voice broke, while you carried the power to change everything. Keanu's shoulders slumped. He had faced critics, journalists, and even the weight of fame, but Elena's words cut deeper than all of them. I was afraid, he admitted quietly. Afraid that if I told you too soon, you would think I was just another celebrity trying to play savior. I didn't want to take away your voice. I wanted to protect it until you believed in it yourself. Elena shook her head violently. That's not protection. That's control. You don't get to decide when I'm ready, Keanu. You don't get to keep me small, so you can feel like the hero when it suits you. Her words hit him like blows. He stepped back, giving her space, his voice low but pleading. I never wanted to make you small. You're the one who made me believe again. You made me see what real courage looks like. I only hesitated because I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want you to see me as someone pretending to lift you up while keeping you beneath me. Elena's hands shook as she pressed the notebook tighter to her chest, her tears now streaming freely. But that's exactly how it feels. Like pity, like charity, wrapped in kindness. And I can't live like someone's project. I won't let Isabella see me that way. Isabella finally stood, her small voice cutting through the storm. Mama, please, listen to him. He's not like that. Her eyes shimmered as she looked at both of them. You always told me to believe when someone sees light in us. Maybe that's what he sees. Elena turned away, trembling, torn between the voice of her daughter and the voice of her wounded pride. Elena gripped the edge of the chair for balance, her breaths coming sharp and shallow. Every memory of struggle, every late shift, every bill she couldn't pay, every sleepless night flashed through her mind like an accusation. Her voice quivered, but carried a blade of steel. You don't understand what it's like, she said, staring at Keanu. To pray for one break, just one, and never have it come. To tell your child you'll find a way when you don't even believe it yourself. And then you show up with all your fame and wealth, pretending like you can erase the years I've spent invisible. You can't erase that, Keanu. You can't erase the pain. Keanu lowered his head, the sting of her words pressing into him. I'm not trying to erase it. I'm trying to honor it. I see what you've carried, Elena. I see what no one else saw. That's why I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not because I pity you, but because I respect you. Her eyes narrowed. Respect? Respect doesn't hide the truth. Respect doesn't sit quietly while I'm drowning. If you respected me, you would have trusted me with the truth from the beginning. Isabella tugged at her mother's sleeve, her voice trembling. Mama, please. He's trying. He's not like Mrs. Henderson. He believes in you. Elena closed her eyes, the tears spilling faster. Belief doesn't pay rent, Isa. Belief doesn't buy medicine. Belief doesn't keep food on the table. Keanu's voice broke, soft but desperate. But belief can open doors. And I want to open them with you, not for you. I'm not here to be your savior. I'm here because I believe the world needs you. Not me, you. Elena turned, her voice sharp as glass. You watched me struggle while you had the power to change it. Do you know what that feels like? To know someone could have helped and chose silence. Instead, that isn't protection, Keanu. That's betrayal. Her words struck with finality, and the weight of them left the room heavy. Keanu's chest rose and fell, his face etched with regret. He wanted to reach for her, but his hands fell helplessly at his sides. Isabella's voice cracked as she tried again, tears welling in her eyes. Mama, don't say that. He's the only one who listened. He's the only one who cared. But Elena shook her head. He cared in secret, and secrets break trust. I can't raise you to depend on someone who hides the truth, Isa, no matter how kind his heart seems." The silence that followed was unbearable. Keanu stood there, stripped of his defenses, watching the woman he wanted to lift up slip further away with every word. Elena grabbed her bag from the chair, her movements quick and unsteady. The notebook nearly slipped from her hands, but she clutched it like a lifeline. Her voice wavered, but her decision was firm. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Not now. Not like this." Keanu took a step forward, his voice low but urgent. "Elena, please, don't walk away like this. Don't let fear and anger take away everything we've started." She spun around, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and fury. "Fear? You think this is fear? This is me finally realizing I can't trust you. You knew the truth, but you watched me struggle. You listened to my prayers and said nothing. That's not fear, Keanu. That's betrayal." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Keanu's chest tightened as though it had been struck. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For once, the man known for his quiet strength had nothing to say. Isabella broke down, her small voice piercing through the silence. "Mama, don't go. Please, don't. He's not lying. He's not pitying you. He's trying to help us. If you leave now, what happens to your dreams? What happens to all the things you've worked for?" Elena knelt down, clutching her daughter close, her tears falling into Isabella's dark hair. "Mi amor, I can't raise you to believe that people who hide truths can be trusted. I need you to know your worth without needing someone else's validation." "But maybe," Isabella whispered, her eyes red and swollen, "maybe he's not hiding anymore. Maybe he's trying to be brave too." Elena closed her eyes, her heart breaking at her daughter's words. She looked back at Keanu, standing motionless, his face lined with regret and sorrow. For a fleeting second, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. But the wounds of betrayal were too fresh, too deep. "I need space," she said at last, her voice trembling but resolute. "I can't decide what to believe while I'm standing here. Not tonight." Keanu's lips parted, as if to protest. But he stopped himself. He nodded slowly, pain written across every line of his face. "If space is what you need, I'll give it. But please, don't give up on yourself. Or on me." Elena didn't answer. She took Isabella's hand and walked past him, each step heavy with the weight of trust shattered. The door closed behind them, leaving Keanu alone in the sterile quiet of the hospital waiting room. For the first time in years, he felt powerless not because he lacked influence, but because the one person who needed to believe in him had turned away. The apartment was unusually quiet that evening. Elena sat by the kitchen table, her notebook closed, her daughter asleep in the bedroom. The events at the hospital replayed endlessly in her mind. Mrs. Henderson's insults, Keanu's confession, her own anger. It was too much to process. She rubbed her temples, her exhaustion pressing down like a weight she could not shake off. A sudden knock at the door startled her. It was late, far later than anyone should be visiting. Elena hesitated before standing, her heart beating faster. She peeked through the peephole and saw a woman in a tailored gray suit holding a slim leather portfolio. Her face was calm, professional, but something about her presence felt heavy with purpose. "Mrs. Ramirez?" The woman's voice was smooth, authoritative. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm with a medical research program connected to the hospital. May I have a moment of your time?" Elena's first instinct was to close the door and pretend she wasn't home, but the mention of the hospital made her pause. She opened the door a few inches, her guard up. "Is something wrong with my daughter?" Elena asked quickly, her voice tight with worry. Dr. Chen smiled faintly, tilting her head. "No, nothing urgent. I wanted to discuss Isabella's case. I've reviewed her medical records, and I believe our program could provide additional support. We specialize in helping families with chronic illnesses, especially children." The words sounded comforting, yet the way Chen said them carried an undertone Elena couldn't quite define. She stepped back reluctantly, allowing the woman inside. The living room was modest, with second-hand furniture and worn curtains. Chen looked around, her eyes lingering on the stack of notebooks near the table. Elena quickly moved them aside, but she noticed Chen's gaze sharpen with recognition. "Your daughter is lucky to have you," Chen said smoothly, sitting down. "It's rare to see such dedication from a parent under such difficult circumstances." Elena sat across from her, unease growing in her chest. "Why are you here, really?" Chen folded her hands neatly on her lap. "Because I've observed something unusual, not only in Isabella, but in you." Elena stiffened. "What are you talking about?" The woman leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering. "Let's not pretend, Mrs. Ramirez. The sketches in your notebooks are not ordinary. Advanced structural models, energy equations, systems no one should be able to design without training. Yet you produce them. Some might call that extraordinary." Elena's breath caught. Fear surged through her veins. "You've been watching me?" Chen did not flinch. "Observing. There's a difference. And I must admit, what I've seen has impressed me. You may not realize it, but your abilities are extremely rare. The government could use a mind like yours." The statement was delivered gently, but its edge was unmistakable. Elena gripped her notebook against her chest, her heart racing. "I'm not interested in government programs," she said quickly. "All I care about is my daughter." "Exactly," Chen replied, her voice soft but insistent. "Which is why our resources could change everything for Isabella. Better doctors, cutting-edge treatments, financial stability. Everything you've struggled to provide could be resolved if you agreed to share your talents." Elena felt the walls of her small apartment closing in. It was no longer a friendly offer. It was pressure wrapped in politeness. And though Chen's words were sweet, the message beneath them chilled her to the bone. Elena rose from her chair, her hands trembling. "You don't understand. I'm not a scientist. I'm not some genius you can take into a lab. I'm just a cleaner trying to survive." Dr. Chen's expression did not change. "That is the beauty of it, Mrs. Ramirez. Genius often hides in places no one thinks to look, and when it is found, it must be nurtured. Your sketches prove that you have something rare, something valuable. The question is whether you will use it with us or against us." The shift in tone made Elena's stomach twist. "Against you?" she repeated, her voice breaking. Chen stood slowly, straightening her suit. "You must know by now that others are watching too. Corporations, foreign governments, organizations that would exploit your abilities without hesitation. We can protect you from that if you cooperate. Otherwise." She let the silence finish her sentence. Elena clutched her notebook tighter. "My daughter is not leverage. I will not hand over my life to strangers because they promise miracles." For the first time, Chen's professional mask cracked, revealing the sharpness beneath. "You may not have a choice, forever. Think about Isabella. Think about what she needs." Without another word, she left the apartment, the door clicking shut behind her. Elena's knees buckled, and she sank into the chair, gasping for breath. Her chest felt heavy, as if the walls themselves had turned into threats. She hurried to Isabella's room, watching her daughter sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm circling them. The next morning, Elena confided in no one. But later that day, as she walked Isabella home from a clinic appointment, she saw a black sedan parked across the street. The tinted windows reflected the sunlight like mirrors. She quickened her pace, her pulse spiking, gripping Isabella's hand so tightly the girl flinched. That evening, a knock at the door came again. This time, it was Keanu. Elena hesitated before letting him in, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "You look shaken," Keanu said quietly. "What happened?" Elena bit her lip, debating whether to stay silent. But the weight of Chen's words was too much to carry alone. "A woman came here last night. A doctor. She said she was from some research program. She knew about my notebooks, Keanu. She knew about me. And she hinted no. She threatened that if I didn't cooperate, Isabella and I could be in danger." Keanu's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Doctor Chen, he muttered. I've heard her name before. She's not just a doctor. She's tied to government projects, programs that look for people exactly like you. Elena's voice trembled. What does that mean for us? It means, Keanu said firmly, that you can't stay here anymore. You and Isabella aren't safe. If she's already approached you, others won't be far behind. We need to move tonight. Elena stared at him, fear and doubt colliding inside her. Go where? Hide like fugitives? Keanu met her gaze, his voice steady and resolute. Not fugitives, survivors. Protecting you is the only choice now. We'll go somewhere safe, somewhere they can't reach you. You have to trust me, Elena, please. Her body trembled as she looked toward her daughter's room. Isabella stirred in her sleep, innocent and unaware. For Elena, the decision was no longer about trust, it was about survival. The drive out of the city felt endless. Elena sat in the back seat beside Isabella, her daughter's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The black SUV hummed along the highway, carrying them away from the familiar streets of their modest neighborhood. The city lights faded behind them, swallowed by stretches of dark countryside. Keanu sat in the passenger seat, giving quiet instructions to the driver, his voice calm and steady. When they finally arrived, the house looked ordinary at first glance. A single-story ranch home tucked into the hills outside Los Angeles, surrounded by oaks and whispering pines. But as they stepped inside, Elena noticed the reinforced windows, the cameras at every corner, and the subtle hum of hidden security systems. This was no ordinary home. It was a fortress, disguised as simplicity. Keanu turned to them gently. You'll be safe here. No one knows about this place, not even my closest friends. It's yours for as long as you need it. Elena's eyes scanned the warm living room. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting light across bookshelves filled with novels and framed photographs. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders loosened, though the knot of worry still lingered in her chest. Isabella darted forward, exploring with curiosity. Can we really stay here? She asked, her eyes wide. As long as you want, Keanu said with a faint smile. Consider it your home. That first night, they shared a simple dinner at the wooden kitchen table. Elena had cooked beans and rice, adding spices she carried with her, while Keanu helped chop vegetables. The scent filled the house, warm and familiar, softening the edges of their unease. Isabella, always quick with humor, leaned back in her chair and teased. This feels like family night, she said, grinning. Mama cooking, Keanu cutting onions, and me eating everything before it's ready. Her laughter broke the heaviness in the room, and even Elena managed to smile. Keanu chuckled, shaking his head. I think you just made me part of the family without asking your mother. Elena looked up, her expression conflicted but softening. She tends to do that. Once she decides someone belongs, there's no arguing with her. After dinner, Isabella excused herself to read in the bedroom, leaving Elena and Keanu in the quiet living room. The fire burned low as Keanu reached for the stack of Elena's notebooks she had reluctantly carried with her. He opened one at random, flipping through worn pages covered in diagrams and equations. Elena, he murmured after a long silence, do you realize what these are? Her eyes dropped to the floor. They're just sketches, dreams I don't understand. No, Keanu said firmly. They're more than that. Look here. He turned the book toward her, pointing to a series of calculations. This is a design for a new kind of battery cooling system. Do you know when you wrote this? She frowned, thinking, maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember. Keanu leaned back, stunned. That same design was announced by a leading clean energy company 6 months ago. You had it on paper long before they did. Elena's heart skipped a beat. That can't be true. It is, he said quietly. You're not just imagining things. You're years ahead. And it's not the only example. I've seen 3 designs in here that match research I've personally funded. The words left her shaken. For so long, she had considered the notebooks a private outlet, a way to release restless thoughts. Now Keanu's voice made her wonder if she had been holding something extraordinary all along. Elena reached for the notebook, flipping through the pages as if seeing them for the first time. Each sketch, each calculation, carried a strange familiarity that made her chest tighten. "I never thought anyone would look at these seriously," she whispered. "They were just things I couldn't stop writing down." Keanu leaned forward, his voice gentle. "And maybe that's the very reason they're so important. You didn't write them to impress anyone. You wrote them because you had to. That kind of honesty is rare." Elena closed the notebook slowly. "But if what you're saying is true, then what does that make me? I'm not trained. I never studied at a university. I barely made it through high school before my life turned upside down." Keanu's eyes softened. "It makes you someone with a gift. And gifts don't ask for permission before they arrive. They just appear, waiting for us to recognize them." The silence between them was heavy but warm. Elena looked toward the hallway where Isabella's door stood ajar. She could hear faint giggles as her daughter hummed to herself, the sound of a child finally feeling safe enough to relax. Later that night, Elena found Keanu in the living room again, the notebook spread across the coffee table. His brow was furrowed as he examined another design. When she stepped closer, he held it up without a word. "This one," he said, "is a concept for solar panel efficiency. Do you know what it means?" She shook her head. "It means you predicted, almost perfectly, a system engineers have only recently begun testing. You didn't invent something new. You uncovered something waiting to be found." His words lingered in the air. Elena sat beside him, her body heavy with disbelief. "If that's true, then what am I? Am I just copying the future without knowing it?" A small voice broke the tension. Isabella had padded out of her room, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She climbed onto the sofa between them, her eyes wide and curious. "I think I know," she said simply. Keanu looked at her gently. "What do you mean, Isabella?" "Maybe Mama doesn't invent," Isabella said, her voice calm, wise beyond her years. "Maybe she discovers, like an explorer. Other people spend years searching, but Mama's dreams let her see the answers before they're found." Elena froze, her daughter's words striking her like lightning. Keanu stared at Isabella, moved by the clarity of her thought. "That's exactly it," he said softly. "Discovery, not invention. The ideas already exist, but Elena, you can see them first." Isabella leaned against her mother's arm, her eyelids heavy. "That's why you have to keep writing, Mama, because the world needs someone who can see what's coming." Elena wrapped her arms around her daughter, her heart aching with love and fear all at once. She whispered into Isabella's hair, "I only ever wanted to protect you. And maybe this is how you do it," Keanu said quietly, "by letting the world finally see you." The fire crackled in the hearth as silence settled again. Elena, holding her daughter close, looked at Keanu across the flickering light. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that what she had been hiding in the dark might not be a burden at all. It might be a gift, one too important to remain hidden. The morning sun slanted through the safe house windows, washing the living room in a quiet golden light. Elena sat at the table with her coffee untouched, a fresh notebook open before her. Keanu had stacked her older ones nearby, each page filled with sketches that had gone from private confessions to something far larger than she ever imagined. He sat across from her, his elbows on the table, his gaze sharp with concentration. "I spent half the night comparing your notes to reports I've read," he admitted. "Elena, do you realize how many of your designs align with breakthroughs that happened years after you wrote them down?" Elena rubbed her temples. "You keep saying that, but I can't understand how it's possible. I don't read technical journals. I don't follow the news. I barely have time to sleep between jobs. These drawings, they just come to me in dreams. That's what makes it extraordinary," Keanu said. He reached for one of the notebooks, flipping to a page covered in symbols and long equations. "This one you wrote it almost 3 years ago. I recognized it immediately. It matches the foundation of a new energy storage system a team of scientists announced just last summer. You had it first." Her face tightened as though she wanted to reject his words. "But I'm no scientist. I'm not trained. How could I know something like that before them?" Isabella padded into the room, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. She climbed onto the chair beside her mother, listening silently for a moment before speaking with the directness only a child could have. "What if Mama doesn't make things up?" she asked, her small voice steady. "What if the answers already exist, and Mama just finds them before everyone else does?" Elena blinked at her daughter, stunned by the simplicity of her suggestion. Keanu leaned back slowly, letting the words settle. "That makes more sense than anything else we've said. Like music." Elena looked at him, puzzled. "Music?" "Yes," Keanu explained, his voice thoughtful. "Think of it like this. A melody doesn't exist because you wrote it down. It exists because someone heard it in the air before anyone else. The notes were always there. Some people just have the ear to hear them first. That's you, Elena. You hear melodies others can't." Her lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her gaze to her daughter, who was nodding with quiet conviction. Isabella's small hands rested on the open pages as though guarding them. "But why me?" Elena whispered. "Why should I have this burden?" "Maybe it isn't a burden," Keanu said softly. "Maybe it's a gift the world needs, but it also means you'll never be invisible again. People who don't understand will try to claim you, control you, or silence you. You have to be ready for that." The weight of his words filled the room like heavy smoke. Elena reached for Isabella's hand, gripping it tightly. "I only ever wanted to protect her. Now it feels like the more I dream, the more danger we're in." Keanu looked at both of them with quiet resolve. "Then we face it together. But you can't ignore what you are anymore. You see patterns before anyone else. That's not chance, that's destiny." Elena sat very still, her fingers brushing across the edges of her notebooks. The word destiny lingered in her mind like a challenge she wasn't ready to accept. "I don't want to be some experiment," she said finally, her voice low. "I don't want men in suits deciding what my life is worth." Keanu leaned closer, his tone steady but fierce. "That's why we have to stay ahead of them. You're not their experiment, Elena. You're a person with choices. And those choices matter now more than ever." Isabella swung her legs under the table, studying both of them with wide, serious eyes. "But Mama doesn't have to do it alone," she said. "She has me. And she has you." Her words softened the air. Elena's expression broke, tears filling her eyes. She pulled her daughter into her arms, pressing her forehead to Isabella's. "You're the only reason I've kept going," she whispered. "If I lose you, nothing else matters." "You won't lose me," Isabella said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "And maybe this is why you dream, Mama. Maybe you're supposed to help me live and help other kids like me too." Keanu watched them, his chest tight. He knew Isabella was right. He had seen brilliance before in actors, in directors, in visionaries. But what Elena carried inside her was different. It wasn't ambition or performance. It was raw, untamed insight. A light so bright it made powerful people nervous. He spoke carefully. "Elena, I know you want to protect Isabella, but protecting her doesn't mean hiding forever. It means making sure your gift isn't twisted into something it was never meant to be. And I promise you, I will never let anyone use you." Elena lifted her gaze to him, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for us?" Keanu held her stare. "Because I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to live in shadows while the world moves on without you. And because I can't stand the thought of your brilliance being buried while others suffer from problems you could help solve. I've seen people chase money, fame, and power, but what you have, it's pure. It's the kind of genius that could change everything." The fire in the hearth crackled louder, filling the pause that followed. Isabella leaned against her mother, yawning, but she still whispered, "I told you, Mama, he's an angel in disguise." Elena smiled weakly, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. "If he's an angel, then he's a stubborn one." Keanu allowed himself a small smile, but it faded quickly. He turned serious again. "And angels can't stop what's coming. Dr. Chen's visit wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The government won't stop. They'll want you more than ever. They'll say it's for national security, for research, for humanity's future, but underneath, they'll want control. A shiver ran through Elena. So what do? We prepare, Keanu answered. We stay hidden, but we also get ready to go public if we have to. If enough people know your story, it will be harder for anyone to silence you. They may see you as a threat, but the world might see you as hope. And hope is harder to bury. Elena closed her notebook and pulled it to her chest, as if bracing herself against invisible hands trying to snatch it away. For the first time, she didn't look like a cleaning lady studying in the dark. She looked like someone standing on the edge of history, caught between fear and destiny. And Keanu knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that their fight was only beginning. The safe house grew quiet in the days that followed. Elena kept filling pages with sketches. Isabella kept asking questions only a child's curiosity could form. And Keanu kept pacing, his mind turning over an idea that refused to rest. He knew Elena wasn't alone. If her brilliance could hide behind the title of cleaning lady, how many others were out there, unseen, unheard, forgotten? He decided to start close to home. One evening, he went through records of staff at his film sets, studios, and the charities he supported. Not resumes or grades, but the margins people who had left unusual notes, people whose suggestions seemed too sharp to ignore, people who never fit the boxes they'd been placed in. It was a gamble, but his gut told him there were more hidden minds waiting in the shadows. The first name he circled was Carlos Alvarez, a cafeteria worker at one of the aerospace foundations Keanu had quietly funded. He had noticed Carlos once before, lingering by the bulletin board after a late shift, leaving folded slips of paper in the anonymous suggestion box. Most workers dropped comments about schedules or food options. Carlos left calculations. Keanu visited the facility under the radar, asking to see Carlos before the kitchen closed. The man who emerged wore a grease-stained apron, his dark hair tucked under a cap. His eyes carried the exhaustion of double shifts. But when Keanu mentioned the suggestion box, those same eyes lit up with an almost childlike spark. I didn't mean to overstep, Carlos said quickly, wiping his hands on his apron. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the fuel burns, the angle of release, the waste, it seemed wrong. So I drew another way. Keanu unfolded one of Carlos's notes, a sketch of propulsion chambers with precise annotations. He let out a slow breath. You're not overstepping, Carlos. You're seeing things the way engineers dream of. You're not a mistake. You're a visionary. Carlos froze, his lips parting as if he had never heard words like that directed at him. His voice broke when he whispered, "No one has ever said that to me." Keanu smiled softly. Then let this be the first time, and not the last. 2 weeks later, Keanu's search led him to Linda Washington, a middle-aged bus driver who worked the late shift downtown. He had heard whispers about her from an old friend and city planning rumors of a driver who kept drawing traffic maps during breaks, scribbling redesigns of intersections on the backs of passenger receipts. Keanu rode her bus one evening, sitting quietly as Linda navigated congested streets with patience. At the final stop, he introduced himself, startling her enough that she nearly dropped her keys. "Mr. Reeves?" she asked, wide-eyed. "I'm here because of your drawings," Keanu said gently. "I'd like to see them, if you're willing." Linda hesitated before pulling out a small folder from her bag. Inside were pages covered in sketches of streets, arrows, and lines, marked with notations that reimagined entire city grids. "It's just something I do to pass time," she muttered. "No one cares about a bus driver's ideas." Keanu studied the pages, his pulse quickening. "You're wrong, Linda. What you've done here could change how cities breathe. You're not a mistake. You're a visionary." For the first time in years, she let herself believe he might be right. The third person Keanu sought out was David Kim, a quiet night guard at a medical research center he occasionally funded. On paper, David looked ordinary. Steady shifts, minimal absences, nothing remarkable. But whispers reached Keanu from a researcher who had noticed something odd. Security reports written by David often contained insights about the experiments he was watching over insights that solved problems the scientists themselves had been struggling with. Keanu arranged to meet David on one of his breaks. The guard's uniform was crisp, his demeanor polite, but his eyes were sharper than expected, scanning every detail of their surroundings, even while they spoke. "I read your reports," Keanu began, offering one across the table. "You wrote here that the procedure failed because the electrodes were misaligned by less than a millimeter. No scientist mentioned that. How did you see it?" David shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't trying to interfere. It just stood out to me. The pattern on the monitor didn't match the movement of the patient's hand. It was obvious." "Obvious to you," Keanu said. "Not to the team of PhDs running the trial. That's the difference. You see what others miss." David frowned. "I'm just a guard. My job is to keep doors locked, not invent things." Keanu shook his head firmly. "No, you're not just a guard. You're an observer who sees the truth. That makes you a visionary." For a long moment, David was silent, staring at the paper in his hands. Then he said softly, "No one has ever called me that." One by one, Keanu gathered them. Carlos with his propulsion sketches, Linda with her traffic maps, David with his quiet observations. He brought them to the safe house outside Los Angeles, where Elena and Isabella were staying. At first, the group sat in awkward silence, unsure why they had been brought together. Elena clutched her notebook protectively, eyeing the others with caution. Linda folded her arms, skeptical of the entire meeting. Carlos kept his head down, fiddling with his cap, while David leaned against the wall, scanning the room without a word. Isabella, curious and fearless, broke the silence. "So," she said brightly, "are you all dreamers too?" The question startled them, but it was enough to make Carlos chuckle. "Maybe, though most of the world just calls me the cafeteria guy." Linda nodded. "Or the bus driver," David added dryly. "Or the security guard." Elena's voice was quiet but strong. "And the cleaning lady." Keanu looked at each of them, his voice steady with conviction. "No, not anymore. You are not mistakes. You are visionaries. You see what others can't. You solve problems without even knowing you're supposed to. And together, you are proof that brilliance doesn't care about job titles or resumes." For the first time, the room shifted. Shoulders relaxed. Eyes lifted. A fragile sense of community began to form. Elena glanced around and whispered, "We were all invisible." "Not anymore," Keanu replied. "From this moment on, you're not alone. You're part of something bigger, a family of hidden innovators." Isabella smiled, her voice soft but sure. "Then maybe the world will finally start listening." In that quiet, the group of ordinary workers realized something extraordinary. They had been found. The safe house felt smaller with every passing day. Papers, sketches, and notebooks covered the tables. Conversations about propulsion, city design, medical breakthroughs, and water systems filled the rooms. It should have been inspiring, but a shadow hung over everything. They all knew the government's interest hadn't faded. If anything, the silence was more dangerous than open pursuit. Keanu stood at the kitchen counter late one night, staring at his phone. Messages from his team blinked on the screen, each one confirming what he already suspected. Surveillance vans parked near the roads, unmarked cars moving through the neighborhood. A request from an old contact in government quietly warning him that eyes were on him again. He knew hiding wouldn't work forever. The longer they stayed in the shadows, the more vulnerable Elena, Isabella, and the others became. If they vanished quietly, the world might never even ask what happened to them. He clenched his jaw, his mind circling back to the same conclusion. The only real protection was sunlight. If the world saw them, they couldn't be taken without consequence. The next morning, he called everyone into the living room. Elena sat with Isabella close to her notebook clutched tightly. Carlos leaned forward in his chair, anxious. Linda folded her arms, suspicious of what she already sensed coming. David remained quiet in the corner, his eyes sharp. "I've made a decision," Keanu said, his voice steady but firm. "We need to go public. A press conference, cameras, reporters. If the world knows who you are, No one can make you disappear in silence." The reaction was immediate. Elena shook her head fiercely. "No, absolutely not. I've been invisible my whole life for a reason. Going public means every eye will be on us. We'll be targets." "You already are," Keanu said softly. "The difference is, right now they think they can move in the dark. If the world sees you, if millions of people are watching, they won't be able to touch you without exposure." Linda frowned. "Exposure cuts both ways. Once we're out there, we can't go back. Every mistake, every weakness, people will use them against us." Carlos leaned in, his voice quiet but urgent. "But maybe that's the point. If the world sees us, maybe others like us will see themselves too. Maybe they'll know they're not alone." David finally spoke. "Publicity is protection." He's right. Governments hate scrutiny. But Elena's also right. Once we step out, we can't step back in. She whispered, "I can't risk Isabella. She's everything I have." Isabella, sitting beside her, reached for her mother's hand. Her voice was small but steady. "Mama, we can't stay in the shadows forever." Elena turned sharply, eyes wet. "Do you understand what you're saying? If people know who I am, they might come after us harder. But if they don't," Isabella said gently, "they'll come after us anyway. At least this way, we choose how the story begins." Her words settled over the group like a quiet thunder. Keanu's chest tightened with pride for the girl's courage. Elena closed her eyes, torn between fear and the undeniable truth of her daughter's wisdom. Finally, she exhaled, her voice breaking. "If we do this, Keanu, you have to promise me. Promise me you won't let them use us. Promise me this isn't another lie." Keanu met her gaze without hesitation. "I promise. No lies, no shadows. Only the truth." The decision weighed heavily on everyone, but preparations began almost immediately. Keanu contacted a trusted journalist who had once exposed corruption in Washington. Arrangements were made for a press conference at a downtown Los Angeles auditorium, neutral ground, public enough that the government couldn't quietly sweep it aside. Elena sat at the dining table that night, her notebook spread before her. She traced the pages with her fingers, as if asking the ink itself for guidance. "These drawings were never meant for the world," she murmured. "They were just dreams." Keanu pulled up a chair beside her. "Dreams can be the most powerful truths, and maybe it's time people see that brilliance doesn't always wear a suit or carry a degree." Her eyes softened, but her shoulders remained tense. "I don't know if I'm brave enough for this." "You don't have to be," Keanu replied. "You just have to be willing. Courage comes after." Isabella patted in quietly, holding a blanket around her shoulders. She looked at her mother and then at Keanu. "Mama, you always told me that hiding doesn't stop the storm. It just makes it scarier. Maybe this is us stepping out into the rain together." Elena pressed her lips to her daughter's forehead, tears burning her eyes. "You sound too much like your father," she whispered, "always believing the world could change." The next morning, Keanu's team prepared vehicles to move them safely. A convoy of black SUVs lined the driveway of the safe house. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, every person aware that the moment they left the property, the quiet watchers outside would follow. David scanned the perimeter with a soldier's precision. "Unmarked sedans, same as last night," he reported. "They're close, but holding position. Waiting," Keanu muttered. "They know something is happening." Linda glanced nervously at Elena. "Once we're in front of cameras, they'll have no choice but to stand down. But until then," Keanu cut her off. "Until then, we stay sharp. No one separates. No one lingers. We move together." Elena took Isabella's hand tightly as they climbed into the SUV. The girl squeezed back, her small smile steadying her mother's fear. Carlos sat in the front seat, sketchbook balanced on his knees, as if the act of drawing soothed his nerves. The convoy pulled onto the highway, engines humming in unison. In the rearview mirrors, the same sedans appeared, shadowing them at a distance. "They're following," David confirmed over the radio. Keanu's voice was calm, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. "Let them. They'll follow us all the way to the microphones. After that, it's not their move anymore." It's ours. Downtown Los Angeles loomed ahead, skyscrapers cutting the morning sky. News vans already lined the street outside the auditorium, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. Reporters gathered on the steps, cameras poised, unaware of the storm converging on the same location. Inside the SUV, Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She whispered to herself, "We're stepping out of the shadows." Beside her, Isabella leaned against her shoulder and whispered back, "And into the light." The convoy slowed as it approached the auditorium. Keanu looked out at the gathering crowd, then back at the group in the car. His voice was low but resolute. "This is it. No more hiding. Today, the world learns the truth." The SUVs came to a stop, engines idling. Outside, the crowd stirred, sensing something monumental was about to unfold. But in the shadows of nearby alleys, men in dark suits stepped forward, radios crackling, eyes fixed on the building. The government had come too, and they weren't ready to let go without a fight. The auditorium was impossible to reach. Government agents closed in from every direction, blocking the planned press conference with quiet efficiency. Keanu knew walking into that trap would mean the end of everything they had fought for. But giving up wasn't an option. He leaned forward in the SUV, voice urgent. "Change of plans. We're going to City Hall." Elena looked at him in alarm. "City Hall? Keanu, we can't just—" "We can," he interrupted, firmly. "It's public space. There's a city council meeting tonight. Open forum, cameras, reporters, live broadcast. If we speak there, they can't shut us down without the whole city watching." David's eyes narrowed in thought. "It's brilliant. They're expecting a product launch, not a council hearing." Carlos let out a nervous laugh. "So we're gonna crash a city meeting about traffic lights and park benches?" Keanu smiled grimly. "Exactly. And in the process, we're going to change the world." The convoy veered off the main road, heading toward the brightly lit city building. Elena's hands tightened around Isabella's. "This isn't what I signed up for," she whispered. "You signed up to survive," Keanu said gently. "Now we're fighting for something bigger, your right to exist without fear." By the time they arrived, the City Hall steps were already crowded. Ordinary citizens milled about, waiting for their turn at the microphone. News cameras lingered outside, filming the proceedings for local coverage. To the group inside the SUV, it felt like fate had opened a door just when another slammed shut. Inside, the atmosphere was mundane at first. Residents voiced concerns about school funding, potholes, and traffic signals. The city councilors sat at their long table, half listening, half shuffling papers. Nothing about it suggested history would be made here. When Keanu's name appeared on the sign-up list, a ripple of whispers spread across the chamber. People pulled out phones, heads turning as they recognized him. Murmurs turned into a hush as the moderator called, "Next speaker, Keanu Reeves." He rose from his seat, motioning for the others to follow. Elena clutched her notebook as if it were armor. Carlos carried his sketches folded in his pocket. Linda walked tall, nerves hidden behind determination. David moved with quiet precision, eyes always scanning. Isabella skipped forward lightly, the youngest. Among them, yet somehow the boldest. At the microphone, Keanu's voice was steady. "Good evening. My name is Keanu Reeves. I came here tonight, not as an actor, but as a witness to something extraordinary." He turned slightly, gesturing to Elena and the others. "These are not scientists or executives. They're workers you've passed in hallways and cafeterias. A cleaner, a cook, a bus driver, a guard, people you might never notice. But their minds." He held up Elena's worn notebook, its edges frayed. "Their minds hold answers to problems we thought were impossible." The room stilled. Council members looked up from their papers. Cameras zoomed closer. Reporters adjusted their equipment, realizing this was no ordinary testimony. Keanu stepped back, giving Elena the microphone. She froze for a heartbeat, her breath shallow. But then Isabella's hand squeezed hers. With a trembling voice, Elena began. "My name is Elena Ramirez. I came to this country with nothing but hope for my daughter. I clean offices at night. I pay medical bills with every dollar I can find. But when I dream, I see machines. I see designs I don't understand, but they come to me. So, I write them down. People tell me they're impossible, but they're not. They're real." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Elena opened her notebook, showing the pages to the council and the cameras. Lines of equations and intricate diagrams filled the paper, evidence of a mind working far beyond her training. "I thought these dreams meant nothing," she continued, voice stronger now. "But then Mr. Reeves told me they mattered. And I realized something. We tell people like me, we don't belong in science, in innovation, in discovery. But we do. Our ideas matter. Our dreams matter." Elena's voice trembled but held firm as she stepped back. Carlos came forward, pulling a folded sheet from his pocket. "I work in a cafeteria," he began. "I serve food, clean trays, scrub floors. But I dream of rockets. Since I was a boy, I've drawn engines that could reach the stars. People laughed at me, said I was wasting time. But those sketches? They match designs used by real engineers today." The audience leaned forward, murmurs of astonishment spreading like fire. Linda took the microphone next. Her voice was rich and steady. "I drive buses through this city every day. I watch the gridlock, the frustration, the waste. And in my spare moments, I sketch maps of how things could flow differently, smarter, cleaner. A city where no one spends half their life stuck in traffic. I was told I'm just a driver. But these ideas could transform transportation." David followed, his tone quiet but cutting through the silence. "I'm a security guard. I patrol hallways while scientists work behind glass doors. I'm not trained like them, but I see patterns. I notice flaws. I write them down. And some of my observations have solved problems those same experts missed. They call me lucky. But maybe it isn't luck." Finally, Isabella stepped forward. The room seemed to hold its breath as the 12-year-old looked into the crowd with fearless eyes. "My mama told me dreams don't pay bills," she said softly. But she kept dreaming anyway, and I think that's brave. People think only the rich or the famous can dream big. But that's not true. Dreams don't belong to the rich. They belong to anyone brave enough to keep them alive." Her words cut through the chamber like lightning. Reporters scrambled, broadcasting live feeds as the audience erupted into applause, cheers echoing off the walls. Elena's eyes filled with tears, pride swelling in her chest as she wrapped her arms around her daughter. Keanu placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder, steady and protective. "This is why we're here," he told the council, his voice rising over the roar. "Not to beg, not to hide, but to remind the world that brilliance can come from anywhere. And it's time we stop ignoring it." The applause grew louder, rolling like thunder, carried by cameras into homes across the globe. The City Hall speech spread across the world like wildfire. Within hours, social media was ablaze, with clips of Elena's trembling voice, Carlos's conviction, Linda's vision, David's quiet wisdom, and Isabella's unforgettable words. For a moment, it seemed unstoppable, an idea too powerful to contain. But just 3 days later, the storm arrived. It started with a headline on a popular news site, "Hidden Genius Project Exposed as Elaborate Hoax." The article claimed anonymous insiders had revealed that Keanu was staging the entire thing, coaching janitors and cafeteria workers to pose as innovators. It accused him of using desperate people to polish his public image. By the next morning, nearly every major outlet carried similar stories. Anchors questioned his motives, suggesting this was a publicity stunt. Panelists on talk shows speculated about his mental state, hinting that he was clinging to wild fantasies. Elena sat on the edge of her small bed in the safe house, her face pale. Her trembling hands clutched the morning paper. "They're saying I lied," she whispered. "That I made it all up. That you..." She looked at Keanu, her voice breaking. "That you used me." Keanu crouched beside her, steady and calm despite the fury burning inside him. "Elena, listen to me. This isn't about truth, it's about fear. They're afraid of what you represent, afraid that genius doesn't belong only to boardrooms and universities. Her eyes glistened. But people believe them. I see the comments, the laughter. They're calling me a fraud, a cleaning lady who scribbles nonsense. Maybe they're right. Maybe I should have kept my dreams hidden. Isabella rushed into the room, her small hands gripping her mother's arm. No, Mama, they're wrong. I've seen your notebooks. I've seen you wake up in the middle of the night because the answers won't leave you alone. That's not fake. That's real. But the pressure mounted. Investors began calling Keanu's offices, furious about the negative attention. A statement from a major partner declared they were reconsidering future commitments unless he distanced himself from what they called this distraction. Reporters camped outside Tesla headquarters. Headlines screamed, "Keanu Reeves loses control. Innovation or illusion?" Keanu sat at the head of the long oak table as shareholders grilled him, their voices sharp with panic. "You're risking billions on janitors and children's fantasies," one executive snapped. "This is irresponsible. Shut it down before we lose everything." He listened in silence until the room fell quiet. Then he stood, his voice calm but unyielding. "What we're doing isn't a distraction. It's the future. You see fraud because you expect lies. But I've seen their work. I've watched brilliance emerge from the shadows. And I will not bury that light to make you comfortable." His words silenced the room. But outside, the world still roared with doubt. Back at the safe house, Elena sat with her notebook open, staring at the equations as if they no longer belonged to her. "I've ruined your life," she murmured to Keanu. "Your career, your name, everything." Keanu shook his head firmly. "You haven't ruined anything. You've given me a reason worth fighting for." The next evening, the team gathered around the kitchen table at the safe house. Papers, laptops, and coffee cups were scattered across the surface, but the air was heavy with silence. Everyone's faces reflected the weight of the accusations hanging over them. Carlos broke the quiet first. "My coworkers at the cafeteria won't even look me in the eye anymore. They think I betrayed them. They think I made it all up." His voice cracked as he pushed his chair back. "Maybe I should walk away. Maybe all of us should. Keanu's losing everything because of us." Linda shook her head firmly. "No, this isn't about guilt. This is about fear. They're trying to break us before we even begin." She turned toward Elena. "But Elena, you look like you're already broken." Elena pressed her palms together, trying to steady herself. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want cameras, speeches, headlines. I just wanted my daughter safe. And now I've put her in the middle of a storm." She covered her face, her voice muffled. Maybe Mrs. Henderson was right. Maybe all I have are scribbles in a notebook. Keanu leaned forward, his tone steady but fierce. "Don't ever say that again. Those notebooks are not scribbles. They are visions years ahead of the brightest labs in the world. I've compared them to projects I personally funded. They line up page for page. You are real. This is real." David, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "But if the world doesn't believe us, what does it matter? They'll bury us in lies until no one listens." Keanu stood and walked around the table, looking each of them in the eye. "Then we don't hide. We don't fight them with secrets. We fight them with truth. Every sketch, every calculation, every observation, you put it all out there. No filters, no hiding. We open the doors so wide that no one can claim fraud again." Elena blinked at him, stunned. "You mean, give everything away? Every page of my notebooks? My whole life?" "Yes," Keanu said softly, "because truth is the only shield we have left. If the world can see it all, they'll know the difference between lies and brilliance. And once it's public, no one, not investors, not governments, can make it disappear." The room went silent again, but this time, the silence carried a different weight. Isabella broke it, her young voice steady. "Mama, you always told me light is stronger than shadows. Maybe this is the light." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. She reached for her daughter's hand, then looked back at Keanu. Fear still lingered in her chest, but so did something else resolve. Then, "We open the doors," she whispered. "All of them." Keanu nodded, his voice like steel. "Then it's decided. We'll show the world everything. Not to prove we're geniuses, to prove that hidden brilliance exists everywhere. And no matter how much they try to bury it, the truth will rise." The team exchanged glances, a fragile fire igniting in their eyes. They were bruised, battered by lies, but not defeated. The storm had come, but they would answer it not with silence, but with a flood of light. The press conference was unlike anything Keanu had faced in his career. It wasn't about a new film, a charity, or a red carpet appearance. This time, the stage was bare except for a long table stacked with notebooks. Elena's worn journals filled with sketches, calculations, and dreams. Behind him, Elena, Isabella, Carlos, Linda, David, and others stood together, nervous but resolute. Reporters crowded the room, cameras flashing, microphones bristling forward. The air buzzed with anticipation, but also doubt. For days, the media had painted them as liars, opportunists chasing fame. Investors whispered about scams. Politicians questioned motives. Now all eyes were waiting for Keanu's response. He stepped up to the microphone, his expression calm but burning with conviction. "The past week has been filled with accusations," he began. "They say this movement is a fraud. They say hidden geniuses don't exist. They say ordinary people can't create extraordinary solutions. Today, we answer not with arguments, but with truth." He gestured to the stack of notebooks. These pages contain years of work from Elena Ramirez, a woman who cleans offices at night while raising her daughter alone. Pages filled with designs that match projects developed by top laboratories years later. "We are making every page public. No secrets, no filters. From this day forward, every idea submitted to this initiative will be open to the world." The room erupted with a mixture of shock and frenzy. Questions fired from every direction, but Keanu raised his hand for silence. His voice carried firm resolve. "If brilliance hides in places the world ignores, then we will make sure the world never ignores again. Every janitor, every driver, every cook, every child with a sketch on the back of a receipt, they deserve to be heard." Elena stepped forward, clutching one of her older notebooks. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "These designs were never meant to be seen. They were my dreams, my way of making sense of the world when it felt like everything was falling apart. But if my dreams can help others, then they don't belong to me alone. They belong to everyone." As she spoke, a figure in the back of the room slowly raised her hand. A woman in a plain uniform wheeled forward a cart filled with cleaning supplies. At first, security moved toward her, but Keanu gestured for them to stop. The woman stepped forward nervously, clutching a crumpled napkin in her hand. "My name is Maria," she said softly, her accent thick but clear. "I clean offices in this very building. I don't have a degree, I don't have money, but I have dreams too." She unfolded the napkin with shaking fingers, revealing tiny sketches of pipes, plants, and solar panels. "I want to make dirty water clean, so children don't die like they did in my village." The room went silent. Cameras zoomed in on the napkin. The crude lines carried astonishing detail and logic. Keanu stepped forward, his eyes shining. "This is exactly why we are here," he said, lifting the napkin gently. "Because brilliance does not wear a suit or carry a title. Brilliance hides in places the world ignores. Maria's vision is proof." Maria's eyes filled with tears as the crowd erupted in murmurs of disbelief. "Admiration," Isabella beamed, whispering to her mother. "See, Mama? We're not alone." Keanu placed the napkin alongside Elena's notebooks, raising both before the cameras. "These are not fantasies. They are hope turned into design. And starting today, we will not just protect these voices, we will amplify them." The reporters erupted with questions, but this time the tone had changed. Instead of accusations, there was curiosity, even awe. One journalist stood and asked, "Are you really saying that the future of science could be shaped by people working night shifts and cleaning buildings?" Keanu nodded without hesitation. Yes, because innovation has never belonged to the elite. Every great idea began as a simple question in the mind of someone who refused to accept the world as it is. Elena asked why batteries waste so much energy. Maria asked why children must drink poisoned water. Those questions hold the power to change lives. He turned toward the cameras, speaking now to the millions who would watch from their homes. If you've ever been told your ideas don't matter, if you've ever been laughed at for dreaming too big, this initiative is for you. We are not gatekeepers, we are bridge builders. And the bridge is open to everyone. Elena stepped forward again, her voice firmer now, carried by Maria's courage. For years, I thought my notebooks were worthless, just scribbles. I was ashamed to show them. But they were not shame, they were seeds. Seeds that only needed light to grow. If you are watching this and hiding your ideas in fear, know this, you are not alone anymore. The cameras flashed as Maria wiped her tears. She whispered, I thought nobody would care, but today, I feel seen. Isabella, her eyes shining, slipped her small hand into Maria's and said, That's because your dream matters, just like Mama's. A ripple of emotion swept through the room. Even the hardest reporters lowered their pens for a paused moment. Shaken by the sincerity of the child's words, Keanu leaned into the microphone once more. To prove our commitment, we are opening a global portal tonight. Anyone, anywhere, can upload their sketches, notes, or ideas. Whether it's on lined paper, napkins, or in your mind, your vision will have a place. We will share it with the world in full transparency. Every voice will be heard. The announcement hit like a wave. Social media feeds lit up instantly as news outlets broadcasted the declaration. Across the globe, people began sharing their forgotten ideas, their kitchen table experiments, their childhood inventions. Some were rough, others astonishingly advanced. The effect was undeniable. The floodgates had opened. Back on stage, Keanu gestured to the growing pile of notebooks, napkins, and sketches now being placed on the table by volunteers who had stepped out from the audience. This is not a stunt, he said. This is the start of a movement. And movements are born not from one person's power, but from the courage of many. Carlos, Linda, and David each stepped forward in turn, adding their voices. Carlos spoke of late-night scribbling rocket ideas during cafeteria breaks. Linda described watching traffic from behind her bus wheel and imagining better cities. David explained how guarding laboratories gave him glimpses of problems others had missed. Each testimony carried the same truth: brilliance does not wear a label. By the time the conference ended, the air was electric. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Live streams trended across platforms, and ordinary viewers whispered to themselves, Maybe I have something worth sharing, too. That night, as Keanu walked Elena, Isabella, and Maria out of the building, Isabella looked up at him and said softly, You did it. You gave people hope. Keanu shook his head gently. No, Isabella, you and your mother did. All I did was listen. The morning after the press conference, the world felt different. Elena sat at Keanu's kitchen table with Isabella, sipping tea from a chipped mug, her eyes still puffy from lack of sleep. The television in the corner buzzed with one news anchor after another, replaying clips of her voice, Maria's napkin sketches, and Isabella's steady gaze at the cameras. The story had exploded. It wasn't just American media. It was everywhere. Tokyo, Nairobi, Rio, Berlin. Keanu entered the room quietly, carrying a stack of printouts his team had delivered. He set them down on the table and slid the top sheet toward Elena. Her breath caught when she saw it. Submissions, thousands of them. Pages upon pages of raw ideas. A fisherman from the Philippines who had designed a net that filtered plastic while catching fish. A teenager in South Africa who had rigged together wind turbines from scrap car parts. A retired teacher in Ohio who had drawn plans for a new way of teaching fractions using music. Elena touched the pages with trembling fingers. All of these in one night? Not just one night, Keanu said softly. One night was all it took for the world to believe it could share. Isabella leaned over, scanning the words with wide eyes. "Mama, look! This kid from Mexico is only 13. He made a solar oven with mirrors from broken toys." She grinned as if she had discovered treasure. For Elena, it was overwhelming. For years, she had carried her notebooks in silence, believing she was strange, broken, or worse, a fool. Now, suddenly, the world was filled with others like her. Millions of invisible minds coming into the light. The flood of responses created a storm online. Social media platforms were filled with photos of crumpled napkins, notebooks smudged with oil, diagrams drawn in chalk on alley walls. People who had never dared to raise their voices were suddenly sharing their most fragile dreams. A man in Mumbai posted a sketch of a low-cost water pump. A grandmother in Kenya uploaded photos of hand-woven insulation blankets for huts. A group of school children in Poland sent in videos of their homemade drone built from cardboard and tape. Keanu's team worked tirelessly to keep the portal running. Servers strained under the load, but the flood only grew stronger. Journalists called it the hidden genius wave. Some skeptics still sneered, dismissing it as a fad. But for every doubter, there were 100 new submissions. Late that evening, the group gathered in the safe house living room. Maria sat with her worn napkin sketches now carefully pressed between sheets of plastic. Carlos flipped through a binder filled with emails from cafeteria workers around the world who had their own aerospace ideas. Linda scrolled through submissions about city planning sent in by bus drivers, cabbies, and delivery workers. David read messages from hospital janitors who had noticed patterns in patient treatments and scribbled solutions in secret. "This is bigger than us," Carlos said in awe. "It's like a dam broke, and the world finally remembered it can think." Isabella looked at the others, her voice soft but certain. "It's not just thinking, it's believing that what you think matters." The words landed like a stone in still water. Everyone sat in silence for a moment, letting them ripple outward. Keanu finally spoke. "She's right. For too long, we've told people their ideas are too small, too simple, too impossible. But tonight proves the opposite. The world is hungry for solutions. And the ones who live with problems every day are the ones best equipped to solve them." Elena closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I never thought this could happen. I thought my daughter and I were alone." "You were never alone," Keanu said gently. "The world just hadn't started listening yet." The next day, Elena walked with Isabella into the living room where Keanu and the others had gathered around a large screen. The screen showed a live feed of messages pouring in from every corner of the world. A ticker scrolled endlessly, filled with names, drawings, and quick notes from hidden innovators. One message caught Isabella's eye. She pointed at the screen, her voice brimming with excitement. "Mama, look, someone in Brazil made a refrigerator that doesn't need electricity. They said they built it out of clay pots." Elena pressed a hand over her mouth. She knew what it felt like to be unseen, to wonder if your work mattered. And now, thousands of voices were shouting into the light at once. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady but intense. "This is why we must stay open. Transparency is our shield. If we hide, governments or corporations can take these people quietly. But if the world sees them, then every idea is protected." David nodded slowly. "It's like sunlight. Once exposed, it can't be taken away." Maria clutched her notebook tightly. "For years, I thought my dreams about water were foolish. But now, maybe they're not foolish at all." "You were never foolish," Keanu said. "You were waiting for the right moment, and so were they." He gestured to the thousands of submissions flooding the screen. The room fell quiet as another video loaded. It was a boy, maybe 10 years old, standing barefoot in a dusty village road in India. His voice trembled, but his words carried strength. "I made a fan that runs on bicycle parts. My mother gets sick from the heat, and I wanted to help her. Please, don't laugh at me." Nobody laughed. Instead, Elena felt her chest tighten, her tears falling freely. Isabella whispered, "He's just like us, Mama." Carlos wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. No child should ever feel ashamed of dreaming. Keanu stood, his gaze burning with quiet resolve. We're going to show him and the whole world that every dream has value. This isn't just a project anymore. It's a movement. And once a movement begins, it can't be stopped. Elena looked around the room. For the first time in years, she felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope, fierce and unshakable. The wave had begun, and there was no turning back. The hall at the United Nations was filled with delegates, leaders, and cameras broadcasting to every corner of the globe. Banners of different nations lined the walls, but the focus was on a single podium at the center of the stage. Standing there, wearing a modest blue dress and holding a weathered notebook with frayed edges, was Elena Ramirez. She took a deep breath, her eyes sweeping across the sea of faces. For a moment, she thought back to the nights when she cleaned offices in silence, when she bent over mop handles and trash bins, hiding her dreams inside tattered pages. Those pages were now in her hands, no longer secrets, but symbols of possibility. "My name is Elena Ramirez," she began, her voice steady, though her heart raced. 5 years ago, I was invisible. I scrubbed floors in buildings where no one knew my name, and I studied by phone light after long shifts. My daughter was sick, my bills were impossible, and the world told me I had no place in science, in engineering, in innovation. They told me to accept that dreams were not for people like me. The chamber fell silent. Every word carried the weight of lived struggle, but also the spark of triumph. Elena lifted her notebook slightly. "These scribbles," she said, "were once mocked. I was told they were delusions. But these sketches became solutions. Solutions for energy, for water, for communities in need. And I stand here not because I was extraordinary, but because someone believed that ordinary people can carry extraordinary ideas." In the audience, Keanu sat quietly in the second row, his face calm, his heart full. He remembered that first night in his study, when he found her hunched over this very notebook, unaware that her life was about to change. He had offered her nothing more than a light to keep writing, and yet here she was, shining brighter than he could have imagined. Elena continued, her voice gaining strength. "I am not alone. In every country, in every forgotten town, in every overlooked home, there are people whose minds carry answers to the problems we all face. They are not hidden because they lack brilliance. They are hidden because society never thought to look for them. But brilliance hides in the places the world ignores." Her words were met with nods from delegates who leaned forward, listening intently. Behind Elena, a massive screen displayed images of inventions born from the Hidden Genius Initiative. Maria's water purification systems in Central America, Carlos's nutrition programs for Mars expeditions, Linda's traffic redesigns that had reshaped urban centers, David's contributions to brain science, and countless others. The camera shifted to a young woman sitting in the front row. Isabella, now 18, watched her mother with tears brimming in her eyes. She was no longer the fragile 12-year-old who once whispered that her mother's dreams might be gifts. Now, she was a young innovator herself, already working on a project that connected students around the world through collaborative problem-solving. Elena's gaze found her daughter in the crowd. She smiled tenderly, her voice softening. "This journey was never mine alone. My daughter taught me to keep believing when I was ready to give up. She reminded me that even when we feel small, we can still change the world. And today, I know she carries this torch forward with even greater light." The hall erupted in applause, but Elena waited until it softened before finishing her thought. What began in the dark, in silence and struggle, has become a light that spread to millions. And it proves something simple. Opportunity, not privilege, is what awakens the genius in us all. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, letting those words wash over him. He knew this was her story, her triumph, but he felt deeply grateful to have been a witness to it. He had not created her brilliance. He had only recognized it, given it room to breathe. And that, he realized, was all anyone ever needed someone to see them, someone to believe. As the applause subsided, Elena placed her notebook on the podium and flipped to its very first page. The faded ink showed the trembling line she had drawn years ago when exhaustion nearly broke her. She ran her fingers over the worn paper and lifted her head again. "I keep this notebook to remind myself of something important," she said. "That the world often measures us by what we lack, by degrees, by money, by status. But genius cannot be measured by absence. Genius is measured by courage, by persistence, by the refusal to stop dreaming, even when no one else believes." The screen behind her lit up again, this time displaying live video feeds from community centers, classrooms, and workshops around the world. Farmers, teachers, mechanics, children all waving notebooks, scraps of paper, and makeshift designs they had been working on. A visible wave of connection tied them together, proving her words were more than poetry. Elena paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "5 years ago, I stood alone in a break room, certain my dreams would die unseen. Today, I stand before you because we proved the opposite. We proved that innovation is not rare, only opportunity is rare. And when opportunity is given, millions of lights rise from the dark." In the front row, Isabella rose to her feet, her hands clasped as if holding her mother's words. Elena's eyes shone with tears, but her smile never wavered. Keanu watched silently, his expression calm, but his heart pounding with pride. He knew he was not the hero of this story. He was simply a lantern bearer who had helped someone else find their own flame. And that flame had grown into a fire that now stretched across nations. Elena ended her speech with a final reflection. "To anyone listening who has been told you are ordinary, remember this. Ordinary people hold extraordinary ideas. The world needs your voice, your vision, your courage. What began in the dark can become light for millions, if only you believe." The chamber erupted, not just in applause, but in a standing ovation that thundered like a promise. And as the broadcast reached homes everywhere, the message was clear. The age of hidden geniuses had ended. A new era of shared light had begun. Now, we turn to you, watching this story unfold. Do you believe extraordinary ideas can come from ordinary people? Share your thoughts below, and tell us, what story should we tell next about Keanu Reeves's kindness and courage? Let us know in the comments.